Well, good afternoon. This is Lou here. I'm at Radio Free Pimlico. Welcome. This is the first in a series of interviews with extraordinary women. And today I am joined by the author, the astronaut, the aquanaut, and the 8-summiter, Vanessa O'Brien. Let me tell you a little bit about Vanessa O'Brien. After 3,729 days, Vanessa became the first woman to reach extremes on land, sea and air. Amidst the Great Recession, Vanessa left the business world to embrace exploration, never expecting she would ever become the world's greatest living female explorers. She is the first American or British woman to successfully summit K2, the first woman to traverse the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and the fastest woman to summit the highest mountain on every continent in just 295 days. Vanessa is the 8th woman in the world to climb the 7 summits and to ski both the North and South Poles, and the 77th woman to fly to space. To the Greatest Heights, written by Vanessa, when you get the chance to read it, you'll see that she did not have an easy upbringing, nor was she born into privilege. That's why it makes her story so incredible and inspirational, and why I'm keen to interview her. She was born in Detroit, Michigan. She worked part-time to pay for her college until a training program at General Electric sponsored her for her MBA. She's lived in New York, Hong Kong, and now she lives here in Pimlico. It's important for you to know that Vanessa is a fan of the British sweetie, The Bounty. Vanessa, welcome.
Hi, Lou. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you here in the show. What an amazing CV. So I've got some questions for you, Vanessa, but just so we can get comfortable here, tell me about what it's like living in Pimlico, just to get us warmed up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great. It has the best of all worlds. It's really bohemian, kind of down to earth. It's got great gyms and coffee shops and transportation. You can kind of just walk the streets and kind of find anything you want. It's not pretentious at all, and I think it's a great place to live.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're sitting here in the middle of Churchill Gardens. It's one of the biggest in, I think it got a lot of awards, this housing estate as well, and it's massive. It's just brilliant. Right here we are, right in the middle of the social club. There's a bar downstairs, so we might hit that when we can finish up here. What do you reckon?
I reckon there's a high chance of that.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Well, listen, I'm going to crack on, and I've got some questions for you. So it's really obvious one, but how do you go from the city or the business world to mountaineer to an aquanaut to an astronaut? I mean, come on, can you give me that in a few sentences? No, I doubt it. Come on, tell me all about it.
Oh, let's see. Well, it reminds me of an old joke that New Yorkers used to say, and people used to pass by and say, "Can you tell me how to get to Carnegie Hall?" And the answer was practice. And we used to laugh at that. And I think of that often, because how do you do something you don't know how to do? And there's kind of two permutations of this. One is trying to do something that's been done before and putting a different spin on it, or trying to do something that's never been done before. But in either case, one shouldn't be intimidated, and one should have the confidence to persevere. And so we're talking about extremes, so let's just start with the first one, doing something that's been done before. And this applied to me a lot, especially in mountaineering, because all the tallest mountains in the world were already summited before I was born. So they all were summited from the late 50s through the 60s. So does that mean that I shouldn't go? No, it means that the first generation goes for a different reason. They go to find a way to the top, and then they check that way, and then they confirm, yes, this is the best route to the top. And so when the second generation looks to go, we have a different challenge. We need to find a purpose, a reason to go beyond just getting to the top. And so an obvious one is looking at the pictures from the first generation and seeing, wow, those glaciers aren't there anymore. So climate change appears to be very real. I can go and I can take pictures and I can show that, there's definitely glacier recession, or I can go and I can take samples and I can show that there's contamination. And trying to find a purpose that differentiates why you're going is a perfect reason to do something that's been done before. And it validates the reason that one should always consider that option to continue to improve upon reasons to duplicate efforts, but not exactly the same. Take what's been done and then improve upon it. The second one is a little bit different of a variation. It's something that maybe hasn't been done before. So here you're manifesting destiny a little bit. And this happened a little bit with the Mariana Trench and a little bit with space. So I had met the first one of the two that had gone to the Mariana Trench in 1960. The other was not alive. And his biggest regret was that no one had followed them. They all followed the astronauts. It was 52 years later between the first dive to the bottom of the ocean in a submersible and the next dive. 52 years is an entire lifetime. So it really struck me that the oceans represented so much of everything in our lives. We can't live more than 3 days without water. Half of NASA and NOAA's leading climate change indicators were water-based. If you spin the globe, 71% of that is water, not land. We get our food from the sea. There were so many reasons to care about the oceans, and yet we didn't know anything about the bottom of the oceans. None of it was mapped. We knew more about the mapping of Moon and Mars. So I found the desire to want to go to the bottom very like pulling me to the moon is, we have a full moon tonight, so the moon was pulling me to the oceans. And so I prepared. I started learning about bathymetry. I started learning about all the earlier dives. I started learning about the history and the difference between sonar and radar and all of these things, so that by the time that third dive and that third submersible was built, I was mission ready. So in a way, I'm manifesting destiny. Did I know for sure a third submersible would be built? Not absolutely, but I thought somebody's got to do it. And that did happen from 2012, about 7 years later, right? So just being ready is important. And space, again, when I came, I went during COVID to the deepest part of the ocean, and then in 2020, I'm always asked what's next. So when I said I'd love to go to space, because I've now seen the planet from all aspects, including the poles, but being able to see it from afar, like that blue marble, but nobody had been to space for 5 decades. I mean, people would normally say, okay, you're crazy. But I didn't give up. By the time the 2021 rolled around and the first private sector started flying, I had already flown in parabolas and trained in different types of simulation. So it's really knowing what you want and sort of putting yourself in a position to learn about the history, to learn about the knowledge, and get into positions of training with whatever you can, whatever your means are. This isn't even about money or luck or being in the right position. It's really about being determined and focused and, being ready so that when people are needed, you'll be called.
Wow. It's amazing, isn't it? Like, so, I mean, who do you call when you're going to, I'd like to go to space, like, how does that even happen? You make a call?
No, it was funny. I had a student ask me once, he said, but how? Who do you email? What do you call? And I said, really? You're not a hacker? You've never tried to email somebody? You've never tried Jeff.Bezos at Amazon.com? I mean, really, you have to go out and take a risk.
Of course, yeah.
So of course I've done all those things. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the exploration world is small, and it gets smaller
Right. Yeah.
the more risky.
Yeah.
Probably is a good way to say that. The more risky and the less people are involved.
Sure.
But still, being trained and being mission ready is very important, because although it sounds exciting, it doesn't appeal to everybody. There's a lot of people who are like, hell no, you're not going to find me like wanting to risk my life or give up that time to train for something like that. I mean, things go wrong, and they go wrong badly, and so it doesn't appeal to everybody.
And, from the little I know about this too, you could train, and then at the final moment something can just go, you get a chest infection or something, that's it, you're off the team, So,
absolutely.
Gosh, well done getting through all those hoops and staying well as well. So I'm going to ask you about that next as well. You're going to space, you're going to the bottom of the sea. How do you get ready for something like that? How do you prepare for a next expedition?
So preparation depends a little bit on what you want to do. And there was a great way somebody put it once, going from zero to hero. I quite like that little cheeky comment. But it depends on what you want to do, but you always have to show up in your best state. And I think of mountaineering first here, because if you're going to climb tall mountains, what's important is really the cardiovascular or VO2 max. It's how your body utilizes oxygen. So you don't want to build a lot of weight, because the muscle mass will compete with that limited resource of oxygen. So it's slightly counterintuitive. You want to be strong, but when we talk about strength, we're talking about core. And these are 6 to 8 week expeditions, so over time, you will lose some of that strength. So what has to remain is the mental strength. So mental is so important. You have to know why you're there, because when everything goes wrong and the proverbial blank hits a fan, you have to have the higher purpose for being there, and something that's going to have you take that one more step. And if your purpose for being there is greater than all the things that are piled up against you, you will succeed.
Wow.
But that's how important the mental strength is. Pilates is excellent. I like Pilates a lot, because it's something that keeps one strong, but not overly bulky.
Yeah.
So it works on little muscle groups, but keeps the core strong. And yoga, I do less yoga, probably because I'm less flexible and less good at it. People tend to navigate to things they're good at. I'm not a very flexible person, but I love what yoga does for stretching, and the ability to, really get out there and, lie on a mat and stretch your, hamstrings and, arms and all of those things. And really, I guess my last point would be, no matter where you live, you can't really make excuses or take excuses. So, I may like trail running, and I might find that's great because it offsets my balance and I can see different scenery. But if I don't have the time and I'm working, or I have commitments and I can't get somewhere, then I can't make that my excuse. Oh no, I can't go, therefore I won't do it. There were plenty of times I was stuck in cities all over the world, and I would just climb the staircases, whether it was apartment buildings, whether it was office buildings, and just try to duplicate whatever it is, whatever activity you're undertaking, and that will help strengthen the body's memory of that activity. So climbing is obviously climbing, right? One step in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, but it's also, you can mix it up. You can skip a step. You can add weighted vest. You can, you can have fun with it. And music is great for that. So, put on a playlist and, try to mix it up a bit and have fun.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I'm just referring to your book as well. There's a few hairy moments in there where, your steely determination. I know it's such a cliche, but some of those run-ins with some of the guys on the mountaineering expeditions as well. I just loved how you didn't take much shit, did you? There's. Do you think it's the mind and the body? Do you think it's the body and the mind? Or do you need both? I mean, how do you do that?
It's really a great debate, and people, if we were to be online and do a poll, you'd get a really varied answers from different people. I tend to think the mind gives you a little bit of an edge. Because the strong-willedness of somebody can offset a lot. But if you don't have the skills, or you don't have the you don't have the physical capability, well, then it doesn't matter how much mind and will you put toward it. You have to. There has to be some balance in that pie.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but all things equal, I would slightly tilt it toward the mind as being one that has a slight advantage, one with a strong mindset, so that strong moral courage, the resilience, the endurance, the ability to keep going despite the setbacks.
Yeah.
That takes you an extra mile.
Do you have a sense of where that came from?
Not exactly, but I have read studies that seem to apply. So one that's quite interesting was one that Angela Duckworth did, a social psychologist, I'm pretty sure psychologist. What she did was undertake a study that said, why is it that some people accomplish more than others? And that was just a great question, sort of the holy grail of who doesn't want to know the answer to that, right? Every parent wants their kids to accomplish more than others, right? Every business wants their employees to accomplish more than others. But what she found through lots of interviews and simulations and studies was what she termed grit. And I always say it's not my favorite four-letter word, also being a little cheeky. But what grit meant was that it was the ability for an individual to maintain long-term momentum towards a goal or objective despite adversity and failure. Ergo, no adversity and failure, no grit.
Okay.
So having had lots of adversity and failure, as you will have read,
Sure.
that has allowed me to continue in a fairly optimistic way on a trajectory of a path toward something, and that sense of purpose. And so I think that gives me that fulfills that ability to keep going on the mental strength side.
Sure. Yeah. It's very admirable. And just another plug for the book, folks. It's a really great read as well. And did you get any coaching on writing? Because it really is a page turner. Did you get any help with that? Because you've got a lot of skills. I was just thinking, wait, you just add writing to that now?
No, what I did was I wrote chronologically, which is a natural thing for someone to do. What the publisher did, which was very, very helpful, was she introduced someone who identified themselves as a plot whisperer.
Oh, okay.
And that person was instrumental because what they did was they took, almost on Post-its, big chunks of the plot and said, wait a minute, your climbing partner has frostbite on his toes and loses his toes, but your mother loses her toes when she gets her foot shut off with your father. So we've got a toe situation. We're going to put these together regardless of where they happened in your life. And I was like, wow, like,
Yeah.
because I'm too close to it.
Yeah.
I can't do it. It's me.
Mm-hmm.
I can see the parallel when the Post-its come together, but I can't see it in the first instant. So what she did was very powerful because she broke the constraints of time. And so therefore, during some of these, summits and climbs where there's backstories being told, that's when some of that more interesting information gets filtered in. So it's less about, it's really less about mountaineering or climbing, more about human beings and the human condition and why people are there and what they hope to get out of it and what you're willing to like give up or give to get something.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I thought it was much more powerful, but I attribute anything about the book that gives it that great writing ability to her.
Yeah, well done. No, it's great. I missed my tube stop at one point as well. I think that was when you were in Papua New Guinea. It was, I just looked up and missed a stop. It was so cool. I'm really great read. So, let me ask you this, is there anything that you're not very good at? Is there anything that you suck at, as they say?
Yes, cooking. You don't want to give me the pots, pans, and ingredients and say go to it. I can heat a mean can of soup and then I'm pretty much out. I am a terrible cook, so I never had an interest. I never followed my mother around the kitchen or anything like that.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear there's something that you should say you're a high achiever and everything else. And as long as somebody's cooking for you, you'll be all right. Yeah. So I'm just going to ask you a little bit about the state of flow. Now, this is something that is very close to my heart. So I'm glad you've heard of it before, haven't you? The cheek sent me high, as it were. So the man who brought that to the world, and that's how you say his name. He's a Hungarian psychologist. So when you're climbing, for example, and that's what I know the most about from your book, are you there? Are you in that state of flow?
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. It's an incredible experience as sort of a state of mind. And I want to read this only to get it absolutely right to how the psychologist saw it himself. He saw it as a state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. I mean, can you imagine that? Like the whole world, everything seems to just like go away. And when one is actually in a state of flow, you feel that. You get the levels of concentration are so high. You don't hear anything, you don't see anything, time flies. All you can see is what you're absorbing in front of you. I think of when I'm researching something. It's really one of those things where you could start something like, 6 p.m. and suddenly you haven't eaten, drank anything, and you look up and it's 3 a.m. and you're like, bugger, tomorrow's going to suck because I'm so wired right now that by the time I wind down to get to bed, it's going to be 4:30 or something like that, and my day's going to be shot the next day. But you're so engrossed in what you're doing, and the point is, and this is very, very important too, because people have said, but flow's a state where it's a delicate balance between the tension and the anxiety and boredom. And what's interesting here, some people have said, no, it's where anxiety goes away. But that's not true. Anxiety is always there on the edge, in that at any moment you think, although it's a boring, repetitive thing you're doing, something can break. Like at any moment in that research, I think, oh my gosh, this might be the one I find. The next one might be the one. Or if I'm climbing, one foot in front of the other, it's very repetitive. 23 hours can go by. But of course, a little part of me is on alert for an avalanche, for a snow bridge, for any act of God that's going to come and like rain down. So that tension is always there to just create a little anxiety that's like a little flame that's kept alive. So the boredom and the anxiety, when their juxtaposition is very, very important. Anxiety doesn't disappear. It's just, it's like on an autopilot, waiting to see if it needs to be ignited. But it's such a powerful state. I've never not known the ability to do it, but I do know that there are some people who can't clinically do it. Schizophrenics obviously can't do it because that's a mentally ill challenge. Narcissists, interestingly, can't do it. They're too involved in their ego. And the other one I thought was interesting was if people are neurotic because they're too worried about that anxiety side, so they can't. Anything's out of balance. Mm-hmm. So if it's a very clever thing to have identified in a psychological way.
Yeah. So it's amazing. But I see what you mean about that thing about the anxiety as well, because it is there.
It's there
taken away in the background.
There's a lot of moving parts. So it's relaxing, but in a way. Actually, he brought up another point about this that's interesting. Is the skill level has to meet the activity. Mm. It can't be too easy and it can't be too hard. Yeah. So if it's too easy, you're not putting enough attention into it. If it's too hard, you're going to tune out. You're going to give up. So a state of flow also happens when you're perfectly matched to the activity you're doing, which is another kind of just perfect triangulation.
Let's take a break and we'll do some music now, I think, yeah? Welcome back. We're here with Vanessa O'Brien, VOB, as she's known to, and VOB Online is her handle on Instagram if you want to look her up. She's a local mountaineer and an aquanaut and an astronaut and an incredible human being. We're just in conversation here, having a lovely time. And Vanessa does a lot of work with charities, of course, because that comes with the territory when you're an explorer. And she works with UN Women and the Order of Malta. And Vanessa, why those charities? And when you're making those choices, is it tricky?
Not so much. I mean, of course, there's so many organizations that are worthwhile, and I think any organization that appeals to someone is worthwhile for someone to give their time to. What you'll find is when you donate your time, how good you'll feel. It's one of those little secret ingredients to a sense of purpose. When you help someone out or help somebody in general, it actually has payback for the one who helps. For me, UN Women, for example, came along with K2 when I was it took me 3 consecutive years to get to the summit of K2. And I remember UN Women, typical mountaineer, by this time I had accomplished quite a few things, and people would say, oh no, you should go for sponsorship. But for a mountain where every 4 that climb one dies, a sponsor would look and say, well, what if she dies? And there's no money on the table at all that can cover up that PR nightmare. Mm. So right away, you couldn't even have a conversation about mitigating risk. So when I was introduced to UN Women, I thought, well, this is perfect. I'm going to go anyway. And women don't have that choice in a lot of these countries. Yeah. Depending on where we're talking about, they don't have the luxury of having a choice of many of the things that we do in the Western world. So I couldn't think of a better flag to represent the type of struggle and that type of mountain to put those two together. And the fact that it took me 3 consecutive years even made it a better win, because people were able to see, look, this isn't easy. She's not walking up there. This is a struggle. And it is a struggle for women, in some of these countries every single day. So it was great. And they did a lot for me in that the first year I tried to hand the flag back, they handed it right back to me and said, no, you are the one. You're the one. I want you to have this flag because you should take it to the top. And when somebody believes in you more than you believe in yourself, that is so powerful. Imagine if we all did that just to one other person, how the world would change. So that was amazing. Now, Order of Malta is a little bit different because that's a religious lay order. That is one of 2 that's still under a papal bull, so the Pope does agree to those that are put forward. It is said that one is called to serve, and I believe that as well. So I believed very much that faith and hope were 2 pillars that followed me, not only through childhood, which was difficult, but also through the mountains and some of the expeditions that were more fraught with danger and harder times, that I could rely on those pillars. They're both slightly different, but I very much had those pillars of strength. So that came naturally. It's also an order that helps the sick and the poor, and my only caveat around that is thinking, how can I help the sick in advance? So, being a little bit smarter, of course, we can treat people once they're ill, but how can we help them before they get ill?
Yeah. Mm.
And that's when I see some of these, things that are being done with when you remove gravity in oncology cells and fluid dynamics in space. There's amazing science being done. How can we help people before they get sick? So I have a slightly different view, probably than my brethren on this. Also, even just on poor, how can we rise the poverty levels overall? Because a rising tide lifts all boats. So I can give to one person, or I can work to rise all standards of living. So, they're all important, and I think it deserves, certainly a portion of a person's time. So, I don't think it's a difficult choice at all.
Yeah. Do you have to turn other charities down? Like, do other charities approach you and say, "Oh, you're so wonderful, we'd love you to be our champion"?
Let's see. I think some people go to charities just for a particular mission. Mm-hmm. And I see this with Marie Curie and stuff, like, oh, I'm going to run a marathon, let me choose that and raise money. Uh-huh. So I don't like the relationships that are transactional. Mm-hmm. I think it's better to have something that is that you're more vested in. Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with the transactional. It certainly helps. In probably in most cases, both parties. But for myself, I prefer something that's probably less transactional and more, more permanent or semi-permanent, or has legs.
I know that you led an expedition too. Do you think being a woman adventurer is an advantage over male adventurers?
Well, yes, to some degree, because women are very good at communication. They're very good at delegating. They have an open communication style. They're different. If we go to the old command and control, we think of that as more of a male-dominated leadership style, whereas women generally like multicultural teams. They like to pull people together, get everybody's input, and they have sort of a team meeting and talk things through, and that feeds into the communication skills. Sometimes I joke a little bit about the caveman, right? The hunter-gatherer, the hunter, bow and arrow, high testosterone, and the gatherer of the woman. But you can see some of these primordial things in nature as well when people are just very basic, and even in climbing, because men are fueled by testosterone. So they're very good at responding very quickly to a situation that comes up, but they get bored very easily. So the minute the minute there's no cell phone or batteries are out or something like that, they're not good at quieting the mind. Whereas women are very, very good at quieting the mind. They can sit in a tent and rearrange their clothes, read, write in their journal. They can do 1,000 things, and you could be stuck in a snowstorm, and they don't care whether or not there's power in, a battery or something. They have 1,000 other things they can do. So I find that they're good at the endurance and the resilience side, and they don't let negative things enter their head as easily. So on that mental strength, they can be stronger too, because that's part of the endurance side. They're not just running on something short-term like adrenaline. So it depends. I mean, these are broad strokes of very thick paintbrush. But I have found at high altitude on long expeditions, women are excellent, because you have to know what to do in the downtime, and you can't fill empty space with negative stuff.
Yeah,
you have to stay focused. And you have to remember why you're here. And, sometimes I see the guys get bored, and then they let negative stuff enter their head, and they need to be entertained more.
Right, yeah.
So that's just my experience.
I was surprised at how much downtime you had, not on all your expeditions, but there was one you were just waiting. It's the weather, right? Yeah, that's who's in charge the whole time.
Yeah, you're not in charge.
Yeah. Current project called GAPS, which is Global Atmosphere and Plastics. We're going to talk a wee bit about the glaciers. So we're in crisis, there's no doubt about it, yeah. Can you tell us, in your opinion, Vanessa, what could we do daily that might help us?
Sure. So the current project that I'm working on now is just a global atmospheric plastic survey, and it's called GAPS. Just that's an acronym, but it's really simply the way that we consume plastics has continued to increase. I can look around the desk, we can see plastic everywhere, but the way that we dispose of it has not changed. So it's still going in the landmines, it's still being burnt, only 9% of it is recycled. So at the end of the day, we've seen some good studies coming out of plastics that have been taken out of the oceans, but we're not really seeing the stuff that's being kind of landing on land, so to speak. And the stuff that's being disposed of in landfills and burnt, the micro and nanoplastics, actually become so small in particles that they're inhaled by us as humans. So we can't see it. We're not coughing when we inhale it, but when we cut ourselves up as cadavers, which is a little crude, you can start to see some of these things. And we're just starting now to see some of the effects that show causal links to cancer or show potential risk to fertility. And it's such early days. I can't hit alarm bells because we don't even know how pervasive the problem is until we measure it. So the goal of GAPS is really to get samples from as much as we can worldwide. We have a laboratory in Leipzig, and then we'll measure that. Then we'll produce a report that says, hey, here are the hot spots, or or maybe we don't have a problem. But whatever it is, and then we can start to look at the second stage, which is what do we do about it? But first, what gets measured gets improved. So first we measure, and we've got teams going everywhere in the world. I think we'll probably struggle and need some assistance to get to some places in the world. I'm sure Russia and China will be hard, but ironically, Antarctica, we've got lots of volunteers.
So how do we do that on a kind of daily basis, do you think?
The one thing I would encourage people to do is be educated and be curious. People say, yeah, but that's science. I'm not a scientist. And to be honest, I'm not a scientist. And that's why I give myself permission to ask stupid questions. I am delighted not to be a scientist and to be able to go and take samples and be able to go and articulate what these things are, because I give myself that permission, and I want everybody to give themselves that permission to go and ask those questions, because most people don't know, say for example, why are some taxis hybrid and the other taxis aren't hybrid? Is it better or is it worse? Well, ask somebody.
Yeah.
I did that exact same thing. I was very curious, and I was like, wait, are you happy with your hybrid taxi, or are you not happy? And then I found, well, wait a minute, they need electricity, and if the price of electricity was greater than the cost of fuel, which was diesel in this case, well, they weren't happy. So where does electricity come from? You have to ask that. And then you say, okay, well, I've got water, I've got wind, I've got solar, nuclear, gas, or coal. So some are more green, some are less green. But there's always trade-offs. You can rank them by cost, you can rank them by green, but there's always an economic principle here, and people don't always want green if it costs more. So always remember, these are complicated conversations, but don't shy away from learning about them and becoming more educated, because I think people think, no, this is too complicated. It's not.
So have you got a favourite memory? One that stands out for you?
Oh, gosh. Well, the UN Women one was very powerful when they handed the flag back, but I think the other one that caught me by surprise was when an 11-year-old in Surrey had nominated me as her favorite explorer, and I was like, wow, that's awesome, but what a responsibility. What does it mean? What should I do? And she was doing a project, and I think her project involved like writing a report. And since she picked me as her favorite explorer, I was worried. Did she have enough information? Her mother contacted me on LinkedIn, and I was just, I think it was the greatest honor ever to have been named that. I wouldn't have even thought my name was permutated, into the psyche of 11-year-olds, because I always say they're too young to read my book, which has expedition language. So I always say, please don't read my book if you're under the age of 4-letter words. Because there's things in there that happen that are life-threatening, and the language is real. Anyway, but it was really amazing. So I did end up talking to her. I answered some questions, helped her with her book report, but more importantly, my opportunity for space came later. And so I reached back out to her and I asked her what I could take to space for her.
Oh, what a lovely thing to do. She must have been delighted.
She was so caught off guard, and it was amazing because she had collected these seeds from around the world. And so I put them in my payload bag, and there was a big, kind of certificate that said, hey, these have been flown to space. And it was just very, very exciting. So I felt like, she nominated me first, but I got to, pay it back or pay it forward, however that works. That was quite fun.
What a lovely story. And you say there that, like the UN giving you the flag back, and, they gave you all this unconditional love, and how we can give that to another person, Do you feel like maybe you did that with a young woman in Surrey?
Yeah. I mean, it was just incredible, because I remember even talking to her like on Zoom or where we could see each other, and she had an enormous aquarium behind her, and I had a koi pond behind me, and it was quite funny. You talk about big girl, little girl. You know, it was just very charming.
Sure.
So it was one of those very touching, kind of situations. And of course, nobody knows what they want to do when they're that young. So this is where I think exploration is just so exciting for anyone. There's apps and things today. I get fathers who write to me and say, I'm going to spend more time with my daughter. And I think that's fantastic. Absolutely. Yeah. Bond with your daughter, go out, you can explore, nature, even these apps, you can take snapshots of plants and insects and just about anything and label them and say where you are, and you're contributing to a database. It's quite exciting the way they're using technology now. So absolutely, I think there's such great things people can do together.
So Vanessa, what's next?
Wow, next. In the perfect world, once GAPS is finished, and my dream would be really to try to take this story either on film or in a limited series. But I need the help of a scriptwriter or a creative team. Of course, it's land, sea, and air. The book only covers land, but the same hilarious things happen on sea and air. I think of it as a dramedy, a dark comedy, something like that, where it would be very funny but also inspirational because it's a female protagonist. That would be a dream, actually, to be able to do that.
And have you got a female in mind, a female actor in mind?
No, I picked one in the book, but as far as I know, she declined.
Oh dear, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm just thinking to you about some of the mad things that happen in the mountaineering side of your life. Especially around poop.
Oh yeah.
Like, is there any mad stories about poop when you're up in space?
There's the same. One of the catalysts to write the book was I was finding myself in situations that, quote unquote, Hollywood couldn't make up. Mm-hmm. And I think when your life starts to give you those types of signs, you have to put pen to paper, because that's what makes us laugh. All the really good sitcoms, all the really hilarious things that you find amusement in, and sense of humor and integrity are the two things that I think are non-negotiable. That was really what made me start to think I have to put it down. If I were to tell somebody something, they'd say, no, that didn't happen. And it was like, nope, now I know I have to write it.
Oh, well, I hope we get to see all of that. That's brilliant. So tell me, Vanessa, what advice do you have for us?
So first is confidence. I think confidence is so just amazing, especially in young people. If somebody looks you in the eye, or gives you that fist pump or whatever it is. What I always like to start with young people is, remember, you can be confident about one thing, and that's how you feel, your point of view, what you think, what you know. So start with the basics. Be confident. If somebody says, would you like A or B? Say what you want. Be confident. And work up from there. The other thing is, you can't fail until you give up. And this is just a way to redefine failure. Many of us look and say, oh, yeah, well, I didn't quite get it, so I failed. But you don't really fail until you say you're done. And this came to me really when I realized that sometimes summits are not single season. An attempt on a mountain, something like K2, took me 3 consecutive years, so I'm not out until I'm out. If people had more of that mind frame or that mindset, I think it would change how people, it feeds into confidence, of course, but it would change how people saw themselves, and it would stop the short-termism and let people go for things that are a little bit harder and challenging.
So It's the last day of your life, Vanessa. Note to self.
Note to self, I'd say make it a double.
Sorry, I can't stop laughing at that one. It's brilliant. We've been listening to Vanessa O'Brien today here at Radio Free Pimlico. My name is Lou. I'm an extraordinary person, extraordinary woman, and this is Radio Free Pimlico. If you'd like to email in and tell us what you think about the show, or give us some feedback, or just anything really, we'd love to hear from you. It's on radio.free.pimlico@gmail.com.